ringers. David Little, come on up and join me while I introduce you. We're going to push in the clutch, and we're going to shift gears into the arena of finances. And David spoke with us, I don't know if it was last year or
2 years ago,
a couple times ago at Better Man, and did a fantastic job. And guys, what an important area to discuss. He's going to coach us in the area of our finances, our financial understanding. So David is the CEO, president, and owner of Eclectic Associates Financial Advisors. He's a certified financial planner, a chartered financial analyst. He was past president of the Financial Planning Association Orange County chapter. Keeping up with all these. He's been the president of La Habra Rotary Club, La Habra Boys and Girls Club, and received the Eddie Award for Excellence while working in that area. When he's not looking at numbers, he enjoys playing golf. Why did we need to know that?
Where'd you guys get this? Where'd you get this
Any
stuff?
of you guys golf? Okay. But his topic is investing in your future. Super important. I'm so glad you're back. And then when you're done, I might have a couple questions to throw at you. But
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Well, thank you guys for having me back. I was hoping, I didn't send it over, but I've got videos of when I was a Little League pitcher in La Habra. They're not quite as good as Christian's. And actually, I pitched for Biola a little bit after Christian was at Azusa, and if he would have played baseball, my career would have ended way earlier. I would never, ever want to face a guy like that. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to start off by talking about charitable giving here. And one of the titles of this talk is Investing in Your Future, and it really is about investing in your future, right? Laying up treasures in heaven. And I'm going to talk about those things. We're going to talk a little bit about what the Bible says about charitable giving and taxes. Nobody likes to hear about that. It's tax time, but we're talking a little bit about that. And then I'm going to get into some technicalities. Hope I don't bore you, but some ways that we help our clients reduce their taxes by giving charitably. And a little bit about our firm. We're financial planners. We're investment managers. We like to tell our clients that anything with a dollar sign attached to it is fair game to ask us. And we really like to help them be charitable. And where we can, we like to direct their giving and show them how to do it in the best way that we think they can do that. So let me start off with a few verses here about charitable giving. I think you've probably seen these, but I think they're worth remembering. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 8 talks about remembering this. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each of you should give what you've decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Cheerful giving is really important. We get questions a lot on how much people should give, and it's an area that we need to tread lightly in, but we really like to encourage them to give when they can. I'm going to tell you a few client stories as we go through this. One of our very first clients back in the 80s, before I was even around at the firm, she was actually a Christian speaker, a really, really well-known Christian speaker, and she had never given charitably. And she asked, how much should I give? What should I do here to get started? And so the guy who hired me, who I used to work with, talked to her about that and said, why don't you start at like 10% of what you make? And she started with that. And a couple years later, she said, look, I'm doing pretty well. Let's bump it up, should we? And he said, yeah, let's go to 20%. And they went up to 30%. And by the time she was done working, she was giving about 50% of her earnings every year to her church, talking about how blessed she felt because of the giving. And it's a story we tell people just to help remind people that you almost always get back more than what you give. So don't think of it as giving things away. One of the things I used to talk about when I taught Crown Ministries courses, financial courses at our church, is that the earth is the Lord's and all that's in it, right? We're just temporary caretakers for Him. So when we give, I like to encourage people not to think about giving their own things away. It's basically giving God's things back to Him. He's blessed us with us in the first place. No reason to hang on to it. We're caretakers. One of the taglines I actually pushed for at our firm when we were looking at branding was professional wealth stewardship. I wanted that to be out there just to get across the fact that we are only here a short time. We're caretakers of the things God has given us, like stewards, and so we should never feel any reluctance, I don't think, to give back to God the things that are God's. Proverbs 11:24. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. Again, giving generously. And then Proverbs 11:25, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. A couple of real quick examples about charitable giving. and what we see from our clients. I've got them on the boards up here. I remember looking through a tax return, and one of our clients, he does very well. He's a great guy. His income at that point was about $15 million a year. And he was talking about giving charitably, and I look at it, and he gave about $5,000 away. And again, no judgment on people. I don't want to come across as being judgmental on that, but I look at a $15 million income, and I admit that I think like maybe he could afford to give a little bit more than that. Yeah, kind of an understatement. And then another one of our clients, and I don't think she'd mind me, I didn't ask her, she's not here. My mom, I help my mom with her finances, which is nice. She basically has no taxable income. Somehow she gives away like $15,000 or $20,000 a year to church, to other things like that. And she lives a great life. She's blessed. She's blessing others. So the contrast is interesting. And again, no judgment on people that like don't hit the 10% level, let's say. But in my experience, I've always seen that people that give more and give generously end up feeling better about themselves. Taxes. We're coming up in April. Nobody likes them. A couple of verses in the Bible on taxes. Romans 13 talks about, "For because of this, you also pay taxes, for the authorities or ministers of God attending to this very thing. Pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed." And then the famous passage from Matthew about taxes also, "Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?" Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax." They brought him a denarius, and Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." Then he said to them, "Therefore, render to Caesar's the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." So we do believe in paying taxes. We do believe it's a necessary thing. Other passages talk about God putting the rulers in charge of us, who he's put in charge of us, and rendering to them what we should. I agree with that. We also try to limit taxes, right? Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but not one penny more, right? That's maybe the best way to do it. These verses are open to interpretation. I found some weird things I hadn't heard of before, actually. I come from a Quaker background. The Quakers somehow twisted one of these things and said we don't need to give to the government because we don't agree with what they're doing. I don't believe in that. You guys can have your own beliefs on that. We do believe in paying taxes, but we do believe in limiting them where we can and doing it in the best way that we can do it. These are some basic terms that I'll talk about as we go through. I don't want to spend any time defining them here. And by the way, afterwards, I'll put up a slide here. There's a QR code, and if you want the presentation, you can take a picture of it and ask me for it, so don't worry about writing everything down. These are some of the things that we're going to talk about as we go through, and again, I'll define them later as we get to those things. So some of the things that clients ask us, and all these things tend to impact charitable giving. How much do I want my children to receive upon my passing, right? How much can we afford to give away now versus how much do we leave to our children, right? People care about inheritance. Some people care about that more than others. We run retirement projections for people, and I like to tell them that perfect retirement planning is when you write your last check to the undertaker and it bounces. That's perfect. So if you do that, maybe you're doing it right. Some people want to leave money to their kids. Some people don't care about it. We'll run things both ways, but it does impact how much you give away in life too. Second, what's my net worth? How much of it can I contentedly give to charity? And so we want to know that so we can help them plan for charitable giving. What's my forecasted tax situation? Again, taxes come in very heavily here, right? Because charitable giving is one of the few things that you can still take advantage of tax-wise. How much do I intend to donate during my life, right? Giving away as you're alive versus through your estate plan. Some people like to leave money to their favorite charities, to their churches, things like that. We'll work with them on that, and that influences how we plan. And then who are the key members of my team for crafting my giving plan? So it's things you'd expect: your attorney, charitable representatives, financial advisors, real estate brokers, CPAs, people doing your taxes. But I'll tell you, from what we see from experience, a lot of this gets lost, right? Some people, your tax person, for example, doesn't see the whole picture. So if they don't know everything, it's sometimes difficult for them to help you come up with a good charitable plan. And so that's where you want to make sure you've got a quarterback. You need to make sure you have somebody, either it's you, maybe you do this yourself, or one of your advisors who kind of knows the whole situation, gets to know you as a person and knows what you want, and then they can help you figure this out. Again, we see if everybody's just looking at a little silo of your life and they don't know everything. Sometimes it's difficult to do the planning on that. So fortunately, we get to function as that quarterback at times. And I do like to tell people, and as we get into this, you'll see, we don't have the silver bullet. Nobody really does. I wish we could eliminate tax bills. I feel like sometimes our clients are asking for us to do that. We can't. We think it's a matter of making good decisions around the edges to limit taxes where you can, but we're not going to eliminate it. I had a guy call me last week. He hit a magic age, which is 73, which means he has to start taking money out of his IRAs now. And he'd heard, we're going to talk about this, you can give money from your IRA to charity and it's not taxed. And so he starts asking me like, yeah, I want to do this. If I give 10,000 to that, is it going to save me more than 10,000? And I'm like, Rob, it's not. I'm sorry. If you give 10,000, you're going to end up with less money in your own pocket. And he's like, well, that's the answer. I don't need to do anything. So he had no real charitable desire. He just wanted to save taxes. Again, not bad. We like to work with people who have charitable desire, and then we can help them limit the taxes as a byproduct of that. But basically, giving more money to charity is not going to leave you with more money in your pocket in all cases. It's going to leave you with a little bit less. It's going to help the charity, but it's not all about reducing taxes. Charitable planning process. Define your goals. Evaluate your assets. Figure out where everything is. Develop a long-term tax projection. Again, we want to know what the tax situation is going to be because that helps us make decisions. Create a written plan that aligns with your objectives. Communicate your plan with everyone concerned, spouses especially, right? Make sure your wives are involved in this too and they know what you're doing. We see this still. Most husbands are the ones that tend to run the finances or the big picture finances. Always better when you get your spouses involved, you get your wife involved with this. I think it helps the situation in general. Put the plan into action and modify it as it's needed, and don't let the tax tail wag the dog, right? Don't make reducing taxes your sole goal in life. It tends to work out badly if you elevate it to too high of a position in your life. So I'm going to now get into 4 of the strategies that we use with our clients, and hopefully you can take something from this, whether it's for you, your parents, your kids, whoever it might be. I'm going to try not to get too technical, but I'm going to try and give you some examples with dollars to give you an idea of what things can work, and then you can, again, talk to your accountant about this, talk to your financial advisors about this, see if anything that we talk about here might apply to you. So the first thing is to take advantage of any appreciated assets that you might have. So we get people that come in, they're writing checks, let's say to their church, which is a great thing, we support it, but they've got let's say a stock over here. We'll use Apple as an example in a minute that they bought, 15 years ago and it's gone up a ton. And so there's an opportunity there to give the stock away instead of writing checks to their church. And I'll walk through it real quickly here and show you how that works. So first step, identify an investment which has been held for more than a year. That's a key thing. You've got to hold the thing for more than a year before you can give it away and get a full deduction for it. You donate the investment asset to a charity. And I say there, including to a DAF, that's cryptic. It stands for Donor Advised Fund. So they're relatively new creatures of the tax code that are out there. We use Schwab to hold the money that we manage. Schwab offers their Schwab Charitable Fund, which is a donor advised fund. What that is a fund that you can put assets, the Apple stock, let's say, into. You get a deduction for it the minute it goes into that charity, the charitable fund, and then it can sit there. It can sit there for 10 years before you give anything away out of it. What you have to do is give the money that's in your charitable account, which you control totally. You have to give it away to charities. So it comes into play in a lot of situations where people want to give a large gift for whatever reason. Let's say this year, the number I've got here is $110,000. Let's say you want to put $110,000 of Apple stock into this fund, and then you can spend the next 10 years giving it out. And as long as it goes out to charitable organizations, that's great. That's the one restriction on that kind of an account. And that would be as opposed to giving all the money to your church this year. If you wanted to spread it out for some reason, this is the way to do that. So the third point talks about that. You get to claim the charitable deduction of the fair market value right away if you give it to a donor advised fund or any charity, and you avoid paying the capital gain tax on it. So it's interesting. I was talking to people about this just the other day. Anybody know what the capital gains tax rate is? Everyone thinks about this. It's 15% basically. That's what most people pay when you sell an asset that's gone up. The problem is that if you go up through tax brackets, if you've got higher income, if you live in California, which I'm assuming you do, that 15% that you think about can really quickly get up to like a 37% number. So capital gains are not, they're taxed favorably versus regular income, but they're still pretty severely taxed. And so we want to avoid even that kind of a tax if we can. So instead of writing a check to the church, you give the stock away, you don't sell it, you just put it into the charities account or you put it into this donor advised fund, and then with your cash, you can buy back the Apple stock. So the example I've got on the bottom is if you've got a $10,000 basis in Apple stock, $110,000 value, so it's up by $100,000, good investment for the last 15 years, let's say. If you sell it and then want to give the money away, you'd pay about $37,000 in taxes. That's that 37% on the $100,000. If you donate the stock without selling it, you pay $0 because you don't sell it. You give it to the charity, they sell it, and they don't pay taxes. And then you get to take the deduction for the gift of the stock also. So it's a much better situation tax-wise than just writing a check and giving cash to charities. So I'll leave that there. And again, we're going to have time for questions afterwards if we want to get into this a little bit more. That's one of the easier ways that we work with clients on in order to give money away, again, tax efficiently. Little more complicated strategy here, and again, is using that donor advised fund that we talked about earlier. I've been using this with a client for years, and it's worked really well for him. In his case, what we did was open the donor advised fund. He was giving $1,000 a month to his church, and so what we wanted to do was fund it with 2 years worth of donations. So $24,000 went in initially to that fund, and he gave the $1,000 a month to his church out of his fund. He got the immediate deduction for the $24,000, and the benefit here, and people don't realize this because they don't know exactly what's going on with their tax returns, but most people, unless you've got like a higher income and higher deduction situation, they don't always get to deduct their charitable contributions. So this gets into the tax code. Forgive me for a minute here, but the standard deduction is close to $30,000. So unless you have deductible things that you do for more than $30,000, you don't get a benefit from giving money to charity. You don't get to deduct it, so it doesn't help you. And so in his case, he was close to that $30,000, but not over it. But when we gave the stock to the charitable fund, the $24,000 this year, let's say, in an even-numbered year, he takes the bigger deduction because he gave the stock away. Then next year, he takes the standard deduction. The following year, 2026, he'll refund that charitable fund with $24,000, get the bigger deduction. So it's called bunching deductions, and so you bump up your charitable contributions in even-numbered years, let's say, and in odd-numbered years, you take the standard deduction, but you always get some deduction for the gift, and then the standard deduction. It works out better. It probably saves him, I don't know, $5,000 a year on average or something by doing it this way than by just continuing to give the money like he was doing before. So you want to make sure you're getting an advantage from the contributions that you make, because in a lot of cases you don't. And again, when we see clients, they give us their tax returns, and we have to tell them, hey, we'd like to see you give to charity. You didn't get an advantage for it. Is there any way that we can change that and make it tax efficient to do it that way? So that's worked well, and he's been doing it for years. It's been a really good thing. Next thing I'll talk about, qualified charitable distributions. This applies to a lot of people. So I mentioned the client earlier who hit 73, and you have to start taking money out of your retirement accounts now when you're 73 years old. And it's a benefit that just came in a few years ago. You can give the money out of the IRA directly to the charity, and it never hits your tax return, which is the benefit there. Just for some background on it, the third point down there, first year required distribution amounts equal to about 4% of the year-end value of the account. So if your account on 12/31/23 was worth $100,000, and you're 73 this year, you're going to have to take about $4,000 out this year to satisfy the minimum. The reason behind that, right, the government looks at you've saved taxes all these years on the IRA, now they want their money, so they make you start to take it out. So that's what's going on there. And again, instead of taking the money out and then giving it to a charity, and like we said, a lot of people don't get to deduct their contributions, so instead of taking it out, giving it away, and not deducting it, you can give that $4,000, let's say, right to a charity. And because you do it that way, the $4,000 never hits the tax return, which is actually a little bit better than a deduction, because it affects other things that we'll talk about in just a minute here. It keeps your income down in a good way. A couple of things to think about on that. You've got to be over 70 and a half before you can start making charitable contributions out of the IRA. It's not the 73-year-old who's got to take distributions, but when you turn 70 and a half, you can start to do that. And then, like I said, it doesn't hit your tax return at all. And so things that are keyed off your income, there's this thing called IRMA. Everybody hates it. It's income-related Medicare adjustment. If your income's too high, your Medicare starts to get really expensive. It goes up. It's a tax. They won't call it a tax, but it is. And so by doing this with the IRA and keeping the money off the tax return in the first place, you don't get that affected. Social Security, if your income goes over certain levels, Social Security becomes more and more taxable as that climbs. We want to limit that. Again, by doing this and keeping the $4,000, as we're talking here, off the tax return, that's not a problem there either. And then there's a this is the Obamacare tax, that 3.8% surtax on investment gains if your income's too high. This it helps you stop from triggering that thing too. It's always better in our experience to give money from your IRA if you've got to take a distribution than it is to write a check for cash. It works better tax-wise every single time. Best example of this I've got a client. She lives in Washington, D.C. She's inherited money actually from her mom and her brother who were clients. So she's got all these IRAs out there, and she's at the point where she has to start taking distributions. And so we've helped her out of her 6 different IRA accounts figure out how much she's going to give out of those. She's very charitable, to organizations over basically the next 15 years in order to limit her taxes. She wants to give the money away to charity, and we're here to help her save taxes. It's a pretty cool thing to see. She happens not to need the money, which is a really good situation. And we love doing that for her. Fourth thing I'll talk about here, strategically designating IRA beneficiaries. So this comes into play, we're moving through life here, in your estate plans. What we've seen from attorneys who write trusts for people who are charitable is that they just put a percentage in there. So people will go to the attorneys and say, hey, I want to leave 10%, that's the most common number, 10% of my estate to my church. And they put it in the trust, right, or in the will. 10% of the assets go to the church. And that's a great thing, right? Very good to be charitable, nice to leave part of your estate to charities. And when we look at that, we also want to look at what these clients have in retirement accounts. And here's the deal on that. So if we identify pre-tax retirement accounts, the important thing to know about retirement accounts is that if you leave them to your family, to your kids, let's say, those kids are going to have to pay taxes on those IRA accounts eventually as the money comes out to them. Churches, like we talked about before, don't pay taxes. So if you've got an estate, let's say you've got $500,000 in an IRA, $500,000 in your trust, or maybe just your house, that's the value, and you leave 10% of each of those to charity, the charity is going to be fine with that, obviously, because they get money, but the kids are going to get part of the IRA, and they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So in our opinion, it's always better to shift the money that you leave to charity to come out of the IRA, right? Give it to the church, let the church take it out, they don't have to pay taxes on it, and then the kids, who do have to pay taxes on whatever part of the IRA they get, they'll get more of your estate that's not subject to taxes. And so again, having a quarterback on the team who can look at everything and figure that out is the way to go on that. And a couple of advantages there. The main one, obviously, is that your heirs, who are people, don't need to pay taxes. We do that for our clients with beneficiary statements. So if they want to change charities, for example, like if they leave a church and go to another one, instead of going back to an attorney, having the trust rewritten, the new church named, we just do a beneficiary form for them, name the new church, take the old one off, and it's done, and it's really easy. So it's a little bit easier to work with as things change than it is to change trusts along the way. So those are 4 quick examples of things that you can look for in your own lives, figure out how you want to do your charitable giving and figure out the best way to do it. I'll give you some common mistakes that we see. I've talked before a little bit about appreciated assets. If you're giving those away, you need to make sure that you've held them for more than a year. So if you did really well and bought NVIDIA earlier this year and it's gone up a ton, but you've only owned it for 2 months and you give it away, the rule on that is that you don't get to take the full deduction for the market value. You only get to deduct what you paid for it. So you don't want to give things away, assets that you've owned for less than a year. The QCDs we talked about, the qualified charitable distributions out of IRAs, it's a new thing, and custodians of IRAs haven't quite gotten around to figure out what the reporting requirements are on that. And so you got to keep track of that, because if you do it, let's say your RMD is $20,000 and you give 10 of it away to a church, you're going to get a 1099 from your IRA that's going to say 20 grand came out. And if you don't tell your tax person that you gave 10 of that away, they're probably going to let you pay tax on the full 20 grand. So you got to make sure that you keep track of it so that you don't pay taxes on everything that you shouldn't pay taxes on. We have clients that write checks out of their IRAs to charities, and for some reason, and I still don't know what it is, charities don't cash checks on time. They sit on them. And I don't know, I mean, usually you get a check, you cash it, right? But we've seen checks written in September that don't get cashed until January, and if you do that, it's a problem because the IRA custodian doesn't know about it, and if you don't cash it, if it's not cashed by the end of the year, it doesn't count for the year that you wrote it. So you want to make sure that you send them as early as you can. The last one, we've seen situations where people don't designate beneficiaries on their IRAs, and if they don't do that, things go to probate. It's a problem. So they're losing an opportunity to make a charitable gift, and they're subjecting their heirs to a lot of headaches as they have to deal with an estate. So always designate beneficiaries. Real quick example of hypothetical clients here. Don and Mary Smith, these are our hypothetical clients. Fullerton residents, that's where we are. Empty nesters, their kids are gone, they're 73 years old. Almost all of their net worth is in their IRAs, which we see a bunch, right? People accumulate 401ks through the years. That's where most savings happen. And so they grow, and by the time they're 73, it becomes a huge part of their estate. And they've got trust investments and home equity. They love Biola. That's right. Forgive me, APU people. I know I'm in APU territory, but our people are Biola people. These people happen to want half the estate, right, to go to Biola and their local church. So we talk through with people like this, giving now the things that we talked about. Annually, they make a QCD donation out of their IRA to Biola, and that's the part of the RMD that they don't need to live on, right? They give it directly from their IRA. That saves them taxes. Hopefully it saves them Medicare taxation and everything else. Giving soon, right? A little bit later, they can donate their highly appreciated trust investments. This is the Apple stock that hopefully we bought for them back in the late 90s. And they put it in their donor advised fund, and then they take the next 2 or 3 years to give that away to their church. And then someday, hopefully a long time in the future when they're gone, they'll amend their trust. We update the IRA beneficiaries for them so that Biola and the church are designated, and Biola and the church get the IRAs, right? Not the trust, which is what I just talked about. So we'll walk our clients through that situation, help them do the best they can, along with the other financial planning that we do. So we get a lot of happy clients. We get a lot of happy charities that are appreciative. And along the way, it becomes a good situation. One of the best situations, we had a lady, she passed away last year, and she was like mid-90s. We were managing like $8 million for her. She was in very good shape. All of her estate, she had no kids, was going to 3 charities. So it was really fun. Every year, all we did was try and maximize her donations because she was never going to pay any taxes with the estate money, and she didn't need to pay any taxes along the way because she didn't need all the money that she had. So we tried to zero out her tax bracket every year by giving away as much as we could. Situation like that's ideal. We love doing it. Financial planners get excited about strange things, but a lot of it involves saving taxes. And she loved it too. Helped the charities loved her, loved us peripherally. So it was a really a good situation and a good way to help people. So that is going to be the end of what I'm talking about here, and then I will take either questions from you guys, or Chris, I'll take questions from you, however you want to do it. Let me get back to I'll give you that QR code if I can get back there. There you go. So if you want these, right, take a picture. It'll kick off an email to me, and I'll email you the whole presentation.
So good. Yeah, let me start with the questions. I'll just ask you a few, and then based on time, we'll see if we open it up or not. But first of all, I could tell during this talk that some of you guys were totally tracking with this. You caught it, you saw it, you loved it, you're making notes, and that's awesome. I also want to say this is not an easy task to talk about finances to a group of guys in all different stages of life. You're a very clear communicator. Your style, your approach, you're very easy to follow. The content is difficult, and if some of you either didn't catch it, or you're not in that stage of life, or you're not thinking that way, the simplest, most brilliant takeaway from what he said was, we need a quarterback in this area of our life. So whether this is exactly what you needed or not in the finance talk at Better Man, just the fact that we're talking about it is a prompt to read, research, get coaching, get help, and I think that's super important. But I did want to ask you a question. Why did you go this direction today? Like, what prompted you? Because we give the speakers, we just talk about money, and then they go with whatever they want. You could have talked about debt. You could have talked about the big picture. I'm just curious, what prompted you to go this way with this particular group?
So 2 years ago when I was here, I kind of talked about broad things and hit real lightly on a lot of different things. And I for whatever reason, it's been on my mind. Taking this one area, blowing it up. I think it's an area where a lot of people can change their behavior a little bit and pick some low-hanging fruit, right? Save taxes by giving money charitably the best way that you can. Fortunately, like I said, we have a lot of clients who are charitably inclined. I assume that's the case here. And so I thought it would be something that this audience could use. And like I said, we really enjoy helping our clients do it. It's one of my favorite things to do with clients.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I didn't know the direction you were going to go.
Surprise.
And no, it's he's not in my church. We're not trying to get you to give money to a particular church.
Not at all.
We believe that generous living is one of the most amazing, incredible ways to live. It's in Scripture. We're better for it, and I appreciate you stepping up and doing that. Let me just give you one question with a couple different parts. Because we've got some guys here that are young. We've got young dads. We've got young single guys, all the way up to guys who are retired and late in life. Would you just tell us kind of, if we were to do something this week, do this one thing this week, it's essential for your finances at this stage of your life, what would you say to young guys starting out, guys kind of in the young professional, middle age, and retirement?
People starting out, you got to start somewhere. So start this week by setting aside, give God the first fruits, set aside some number that's comfortable for you that you feel led to do. Set that aside and give it, and start doing that systematically throughout the year. I think that's really important. For guys who are farther along,
let me broaden it to just finances in general. So I'm 25. So giving is one thing, but like to be on track for a financially fit life.
Yeah,
so I'm kind of going a little bit off script.
No, so that's good. So be systematic. To me, be systematic about everything. So working the charitable side in, figure out what you're going to give, set that aside. Pick another percentage that's what you're going to save for the long term, let's say, and set that aside. If you've got any other goals, set that percentage aside, and be consistent with it, right? Pay yourself first is a concept that we like to preach. So pay the charities, pay yourself in terms of retirement, pay yourself in terms of saving, and live what's left over. Just make sure you set it aside.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's the young age.
That's the young age.
Okay.
Farther along.
Yep.
Be in close communication with your spouse, especially, right? I'm early 50s, but starting to think about retirement and things like that. Make sure you're on the same page about what your finances are going to allow you to do long term. So talk to advisors that you have about that. Communicate with your spouse. Make sure you're in good shape there, and do the things that you can do between now and retirement to set yourself up for that. And then the further stage, again, then you start talking about legacy planning. I met with some clients this week. They're pushing 80. They brought their grandkids in, trying to teach them about how to run their finances. It's a really cool thing to see this guy mentoring his grandkids by having them talk to me about what he can do to set himself up for way down the road in life. So I think it shifts from taking care of yourself when you're young, working with your spouse when you're in the middle, let's say, and then when you get older, it is about legacy planning. We talked about mentoring a little bit. Start to mentor the people that are coming after you. Teach them the things that you know that you've learned so that you can put them on the path that they should be on. So
good. So if there's a guy sitting here maybe just kind of feels a little clueless, I've got to learn more, I've got to get better about all of this, do you have a resource you point them to? Do you like Dave Ramsey?
Dave, that's a good idea. Dave Ramsey has some really good ideas. Basically avoiding debt, which is one of his big things, is something that we really agree on. Again, back to my Crown Ministry days, teaching that in churches, debtors are subject to their lenders, so you want to get out of that as soon as you can. So Dave Ramsey's a really good place to start. Don't agree with everything he says, but the foundational stuff is really, really good.
Okay, who would win in a fight?
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey or Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
I don't know how to handicap that one. Go check it out, yeah.